Imagine you're on a ship, a diving vessel in the middle of the North Sea, and you go down below deck, and there is a gleaming stainless steel chamber, and the hatch is open, and you slither through, and the hatch gets locked behind you, and inside there are 5 other professional divers. And that's all before A, you get wet and you start work on the oil pipelines, and B, before the first murder. The chamber came around because I'm fascinated by secret worlds.
Where did you get that idea that was like, oh, I'm gonna write a book that takes place in a bottle episode?
I kind of knew I wanted to tell a story.
Man, dude, thank you so much for doing this. So we got to link up. Was that April for the Simon and Schuster? Or was it May?
It was April. It was April. Yeah, that was quite a week.
That was wild. That was really cool to be invited to go back there. 100th anniversary, Simon and Schuster, and what a fun couple days.
It was amazing. It was an honor to be there, and it was amazing to see that all those literary people, serious book people. And then in the corner, there's me and you having a chat about forests and stuff.
And watches. Yeah, I want to get to that. I want to get to that, by the way. Vintage watches. We found out we had a lot in common. It was awesome to link up. And I forget that first night. Did you go to the first night as well in the theater?
I did not. I missed you. I flew in that night.
Okay, you came in that night. So
I couldn't make it, but I've seen your speech online. It looked amazing. Very cool.
Well, thank you. That's not my thing. I'm not comfortable talking in front of people like that. I really don't like that at all. I love talking about just books, like when you can engage with an audience and ask, anybody have any questions? Then you could answer that person's question, because then at least someone is interested in what you have to say. But that one, you're just up there and there's lights in your face. You can't really see anybody. It's a huge auditorium. But also, I went after Frederick Bachman from Sweden. Have you seen his speech?
Yeah. It went pretty viral, right? His speech.
Oh my God.
It was a good speech.
So good. Hilarious. Yeah. So good. And I either went right after him or there was someone between us. I can't remember, but in very close proximity. And so amazing speech, just not so great if you go after him. Anybody who hasn't seen that should look that up. Frederick Bachman's speech at Simon and Schuster 100th anniversary. It'll pop right up. But oh man, hilarious. And he described like every author's essentially life, and in a way that was hilarious. So good. So anybody should look that up.
He's good. I think that's a Swedish thing as well. In Sweden, people make a lot of speeches.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. It's like a thing you get used to being as a teenager. You drink a lot and you're out on the islands in the archipelago. You're out in the forest. You're eating a lot of crawfish out of the rivers. And then you make a drunken speech. So they get used to it.
No way. That is very interesting. Because you've been there. How long have you been there now?
We've been here full time for 12 years now in the woods.
So I want to get to that. I want to get to all that stuff. But first, want to hold this up. I wish I had some more books to put in the background right here. The Chamber, so good. I mean, this thing was awesome. And for this, not really for this one, but for like when I do the weekly podcast and I have to read something, I read it really quick, and because it's work. It's not sitting back in a hammock and relaxing and having a drink and just enjoying it just for the love of the book. So it's like work. And then I started this one, and for a second I was like, oh, it might be like that because I'm going to want to give this a blurb and everything. And then it turned into one of those reading experiences like I used to have before it was for work, when it was just about the magic and the words in these pages. And it was so refreshingly great. Just super fired up about it. So for anybody listening, if they haven't picked up The Chamber yet, go pick it up right now, anywhere books are sold. And you can get it for 15% off by going to my website. This is part of the book club. You can go there, partnering with independent bookstores, trying to get people to go to those stores. It's a little harder to go and order something for a small independent bookstore rather than just hit the easy button on Amazon or something like that. So it's part of an effort to get people to read and also to support local independent bookstores. So they can go to my website and find out where you can get this 15% off, but pick it up, add it to your library. But before I get to this and what led to this and all the research that went into this, which I want to ask you about, a couple rapid fires. So I know you grew up in a house that didn't have books everywhere, but you went to the local library. And I'm going to ask you about that a little bit more in a second. But favorite book from those formative years that you checked out from a library?
That's a good question. There were a few. There was when I was really young, it was Roald Dahl, and it was Danny the Champion of the World,
Mm,
which for me it's all about fatherhood. It's about a man and a boy living in a little caravan in the woods, and it's about hunting and it's about poaching, and it's about this poor kid who hasn't got his mom there. And it's such bold writing because the first page is from the boy's perspective, from Danny's perspective, saying his mom was dead. Imagine doing that in a children's book. Like, it's very dark.
I remember that. I
It's
haven't thought about
not
it in years, and I remember that now. Wow.
Yeah, I love the way he doesn't patronize kids. Like, it's straight in there. And then the whole book is it's about social injustice and like some toffee-nosed British aristocrat and getting one back on him and stealing all of his birds and poaching and hunting. And it's all about being a little bit wild, like keeping the wild kid inside of you alive, which I really like. So
Yeah.
that book resonated a lot. And my favorite book as an adult, sorry if I'm leaping forward, but my favorite book as an adult is The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Yep. I have
And
it
for
right
me,
over there.
they're almost they're almost kind of companion novels, I think, because they're both about father and son,
Yep.
isolated, just trying to get through. They're both very different, but it's that father-son story which really resonates with me.
Have you read both of those books multiple times?
Yeah, I've read Danny the Champion of the World maybe, I don't know, 10 times, mainly as a kid, and now to my boy. And then The Road, I must have read it 15 times. I read it every time I write a new book. I read it before I start the first draft.
Oh, wow.
It's
Interesting.
like a superstition it gets me in that zone and then I'm in.
That's interesting. So the showrunner of the Terminal List and now Terminalist Dark Wolf and True Believer, before he starts writing, he watches about 15 minutes of a movie and maybe a show, but he sits down and he might do it on the rower, but regardless, he watches that just to get him in that frame of mind, that storytelling, and then he's into it. So I think it's a good
Yeah.
the really cool thing. I don't have a ritual like that, and I think I might need one. But it's like a primer, like a little primer that cues probably you mentally that hey, it's time to either start your book or hey, to start writing for the day. So I think I might need something like that. I'm going to add that to my list of things to
I,
do.
I think you're doing just fine. But yeah, I think maybe like a shortcut where you're in that kind of world. It really helps me. And I like having a very strict routine as well, so that I know what I need to be doing when I'm sitting in that chair.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the to growing up. So you didn't have books around, but you went to a library a lot. And so, what are your memories of what were those formative years? Like, when did you in high school? Then did you start like buying books, or in college, or did you start building like the library behind you?
I like that you call this a library where
I
it's just
love it. It can be a
chaos.
library. Hey, a man and his watch. I have that right behind, right over there as well.
This
So
one, it's
yeah,
a good
yeah,
book.
right there.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
That's awesome. No, I love it. Libraries can look like anything, They certainly don't have to look like this.
Like yours, it looks very smart. I don't know. As a kid, I was a massive reader. Like you said, no books in the house, no readers in the house. So I was able to read stuff that my friends weren't allowed to read because my family didn't know what I was getting into. So I was reading Frankenstein. I was reading Stephen King stuff really young. And I wasn't allowed to watch those films, but I could get access to those amazing stories with the book. So I felt like I was getting access to a secret world, and just getting as much out of the library as I could. And the library was a truck. It was a van that would go around from little village to village. We were so isolated. And the librarians were amazing. They would kind of help me out and suggest stuff and point me in the right direction. And then when I was older, when I was a teenager, I fell out of love with with reading. I kind of did that teenage boy thing where I was just I was playing a lot of rugby at the time, and I was interested in girls, and I was interested in other stuff. And I just stopped reading for maybe a year and a half. And then I was working on a farm in the summertime, and I reread Frankenstein, and then I read Train Spotting by Irvine Welsh
Hmm.
back to back, like those two. And then I was like, I'm back in, and I'm going to be a reader for life now.
Interesting. And tell me a little about where you grew up, like how isolated, when you're talking isolated, what is describe isolation?
I mean, by your standards, it's not. By like Alaska standards, it's not isolated at all. But we just didn't have any neighbors. So my dad is kind of a lone wolf kind of guy. He likes being out in the middle of the sticks, and it wasn't wilderness, but it was remote in the East Midlands, in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, our little local town had no bookshop. I never saw a bookstore until I went to college when I was 18. So it was kind of like it's kind of town you want to escape. And that was my main focus in life. Was my grandfather gave me the advice, try in school, try hard, you've got a chance, you might get out of here. And that was my main focus. And I still love going back there now, seeing my friends and family, but I'm glad I got out.
Yeah. And you went to study law at some point.
Yeah, that's right. When I was 17, I went to London to study at the LSE, study law. And that was because even though like nobody in my family went to school past the age of 15, they were smart people, but they just never did that route.
Yeah.
And they'd never gone to college. So they said, if you go to college, you need to study something that leads directly to a job. Like you're not going to go and study social studies. We're not having that. And this was even though in the UK at the time, there were no fees, like it was free. And because my family didn't have a lot of resources, I actually got paid to go. And even then they were like, you need to study something that leads directly to a job. So I studied law, but I missed something out, which is that I didn't realize all the other kids around me whose parents had gone to college, they were building a resume that whole time. They were playing the violin. They were going to do charity work in Africa. Like they were building a resume. So when it got time to go for the big jobs in law firms and banks, I'd worked construction every summer. So I was not in that world. I had no resume because I just worked on building sites the whole way through. So I ended up just carry on working in bars and doing like normal jobs, whereas all my friends were in banks and law firms, and I was just working like I ended up working a commission only sales job, which was wild. So interesting characters now that I can draw upon as a writer. But like you eat what you kill. If I didn't earn, I didn't pay my rent. And that was fine for a while. But then after a while, I was like, I need more out of life than this. So I ended up reapplying for law firms. I got into the biggest law firm in the world. I think I was very creative with my resume at that time. And then once I got that job, I was like, I don't want that job. And then I applied to trading houses and banks, and I got my dream job at a trading firm. And they liked the fact that I'd had a weird CV. By that point, I was like 25, and they liked the fact that I had a different experience.
Yeah.
And I did that for 10 years.
10 years. I didn't realize it was that long. And did you start out liking it, or what was that 10-year journey like?
I mainly did that job because I read Liar's Poker, the book, the Michael Lewis book. Oh. And I didn't know about that world, and I'm not suited to that world. Like I'm a forest hermit. I'm a quiet man of the forest. So that was a weird, being in the city of London, like the equivalent of Wall Street, was very odd for me. But I took it for being a great experience, like an interesting experience. I had a good boss, and I had some interesting times. And then I knew it wasn't for me. And my wife by then was Swedish, so we were like, let's go and try and live in Sweden in a quiet way. So we always had an exit strategy. Halfway through, our friends were buying fancy cars and going on vacation. We didn't do any of that. We just saved because we wanted to live somewhere quiet. We didn't realize that we would end up being this quiet.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about where you ended up. But during that transition, when did you start writing that first book? Because now there's 9 now, right? Is this 9?
There's 9 now. There's a stack of books. Yeah, there's 4 standalone novels and 5 in the series. And I started writing in my mid-30s once I'd moved to the woods. So in London, I kind of knew I wanted to tell a story. My whole life, I was just happy being a reader. I never thought I'd be a writer. I'm not one of those writers who knew they would be a writer since they were 5 years old. I didn't think someone like me could ever be a writer. And then I got some confidence in my 30s. And I used to go to this stationery store in my lunch break every day. And I would see a pad of paper and the pen I wanted to buy, which was just a disposable pen. And for about 2 years, I saw it at least every week. And I thought, when I leave my job, I'm going to buy that pen and that paper, and I'm going to write a book. And on my last day in the job, I bought the pen and I bought the pad, and I took it to Sweden and I wrote the book.
Amazing.
And I also bought that same day a laptop, a compact laptop for about $150. It's about this thick. It's black, and I've written all my books on it. And I love this thing. Yeah, in one laptop, it runs like Windows. I don't know what it is, but very old
98
version of Windows. Yeah, I think so. It doesn't connect to the internet, which I love. It's great.
That's key.
Um, it's a good thing, right? And the screen is small. I mean, it's terrible. Most of the keys are missing their identifiers, but I love it because if I don't type for a little while, I get a little electric shock, which is just what I need if I'm being lazy. So
Wow, interesting. No, I have the same, well, not the same, but I have one computer that is just for writing. So it connects to the internet so I can update Word and all that stuff and, antivirus, whatever. So it does that. And then it has one email address on it where I can send myself emails with ideas and stuff. It's just for the book. So I'm not searching through a bunch of other emails on my other computer, getting distracted by things, looking for that idea that I know I sent myself at some point about the current book or the future book or whatever it might be. So I have a separate computer that's just for that. And then when I get on it, I turn it off so I can just write on it for the day. But I find that is very helpful. And I take this one, the one that I'm on right now, and I put that computer in another room. The phones
yeah,
go in another room. Helpful if it's on another floor. Just that separation is very important for my process anyway. But man, what are you going to do when that thing goes down hard?
I mean, I don't want to think about it. Like it's going to happen at some point, but right now, because it doesn't connect and it has no battery life, it just stays on my desk, and I only use it when I'm writing. So I'm babying it, like I'm looking after it. It'll be all right.
Is that where you are right now? Is this where you write?
This is where I no, this is where I do a lot of like notes
Okay.
and that kind of thing in the
Yeah.
corner. There's a thunderstorm going on just outside, so if you hear that, that's what it is. But I'm here with my dog, writing notes, doing research, and then I write in a little room in the main cabin, which I have the blinds pulled, earplugs in, the old laptop, no distractions at all,
Yeah.
offline.
That's it. Yeah, the no distractions is also so key. No interruptions. It's not even the distractions. It's the interruptions that really kill me and throw me off. So if I can do that, just quiet. Doesn't matter. I don't need a view. I don't need anything else. I just need quiet. And so I can't do it although I did for the first time. And I don't know if I just told myself that I couldn't write in like a coffee shop with all that background. I know Malcolm Gladwell goes there because he came kind of age in a newsroom when people were still like typing on typewriters and there was just noise and chaos everywhere. So he likes that background noise. And for me, I don't know if I just assumed that I wouldn't like it because for years I said I can't write like that. I need to have quiet and no interruptions. And then I was in Budapest filming the latest show, and I went outside to the cafe that's attached to the hotel where I was staying, and I sat there. So people going by, but it was just like a corner, just on the outside, kind of like the European type cafe. No cars because it was just a cobblestone street with just bicycles and people walking. And I thought that would be distracting, and I got so much done there. And
Okay.
maybe because I also have someone, in a cafe, and so bringing me coffee, bringing me beer, bringing me snacks, like just kind of full service. That might be part of it, but I actually enjoyed that environment. So now I'm thinking that I might give that a go. Maybe not here, because in the States it's hard to find a place where you're on a sidewalk where there's not cars,
Yeah.
going by. I have
Yeah.
to find the right spot for that. So, but yeah, but that is interruptions, but it's kind of only interruptions if you want interruptions, like if you catch the eye of the waiter and bring you another beer type thing.
I mean, that's real author behavior. You're getting into Ernest Hemingway levels there. I like that.
It felt great. Actually, it felt really good to write there. Unless you have to go up and use the restroom or something, then you're like, okay, I have my backpack, I have like books, I have my computer. Am I supposed to like put everything away and just hope no one or just go and hope no one snags this? But I did enjoy it. So when I go back here soon, I'll try that again, see how much work I can get done. Bo behind you. So I saw on your Instagram, which is awesome because you mentioned your dog also. That Saint Bernard is huge.
He's a big
Wow.
lad. He's about 200 pounds.
That is amazing. So people go check out that. So it's Will R. Dean on Instagram. And then you have your boy out there shooting the bow, which I loved also.
Yeah, yeah. Our son Alfie, he's 10 years old now, and the first 7 years of his life was really wild because he's only ever lived in the forest. He thinks everybody lives like this,
Wow.
and in Sweden you don't start school until you're 7, which I
Oh,
like. You're allowed to be free until you're 7. So then he went to school in a forest school over the way in another forest, and the first day we went in to pick him up, and the teacher said Alfred's had a great day. He's enjoyed himself. He's made friends, but there's been one issue, which is that when he needed the bathroom, he just walked out into the woods and just peed against a tree.
Nice.
And he can't do that. And I was so proud of him. That's good behavior.
I love it. I love it. I know one of my things is I only want to live places where I can do that. And that's fantastic. How do you get it to school? So do you drive? So you guys have one car, right?
Yeah, we have a truck, and we drive. The first 15 minutes of any journey for us is off-road, depending on weather conditions. So it's really off-road. Like if you look at it from an aerial perspective, the map or the satellite image, you can't see a road at all. It's just very rudimentary. It's the kind of thing my wife, who's great, was very concerned about when we tried to build this place. And now she loves it, and she's really good at driving through it. So it's good fun, especially in bad weather. It's good fun.
I mean, I love where you live. We zoomed in on it when we were hanging out in New York, zoomed in on it. I checked it all out. I mean, I think I might be your neighbor one day, which might mean, we'll be far away. Neighbors there look like they're pretty sparse. And what vehicle are you driving? Are you driving like
a Defender, a Land Rover?
Is it the new one or an old one? I forgot.
No, it's old. It's old and it's uncomfortable. But I like it, and it's difficult.
I don't know if I made it up in my head or if that was true. I was like, I swear, but I might be, conflating some things. But that's how I pictured you driving out there.
It's good. I like it. Obviously, it is, and it's a good vehicle. I think in Britain because you can get it serviced easily, you get parts. But in Sweden, it's a liability. It makes no sense to have a Land Rover here, but I like it.
Yeah. Oh man. So how far is the school then? In the mornings? It's
not that far. It's like 20 minutes. It's okay.
Well, that's not bad. Yeah. And then you guys can also get is it the ocean? Where do you go when you get out, hit the water?
Yeah, we drive west for about 40 minutes, and we hit a completely unspoilt stretch of ocean, like a string of islands, which are great for kayaking and kite surfing and stuff. And there's nobody there. Like we'll go on a nice day and there's thousands of coves, thousands of islands, literally thousands, and there's nobody there because Sweden is so sparsely populated. And most people want conveniences. They want a nice restaurant. We don't really want that. So if you want to be on your own in beautiful nature, it's a good place to be.
Yeah. Well, there's a few reasons for my wife and I are talking about heading out that direction next summer. So there's a few spots that we need to hit up there. So might be in your neck of the woods at that point. But what a beautiful place to live! Just incredible. And what about winters? What are you doing for winters? What changes for you guys?
I mean, that's the fun part. I don't. It gets very dark here because we're about as far north as Alaska. So it gets dark. It doesn't get that cold. It gets -15, -20, -25 at a max, but it gets dark. So in the midwinter, it's pretty much just always dark. But I think the Swedes are just good at dealing with that stuff. So as long as I've chopped enough wood in the year and collected enough firewood, then we're good. And that's really my big practical job of the year, is to make sure I've felled enough wood and chopped it and seasoned it properly, ready for the winter. And that's kind of an art which I'm still getting used to, because the Swedes around here, they're proper Viking Swedes, and they're very good at this stuff. They've just got it in their blood, and I'm still learning and failing. But we so far we've got through each winter, so we're doing all right.
When you showed up there, were you accepted with open arms, or people like keep to themselves and don't really care who's over there as long as they stay to themselves? Or what's that like, especially coming in from obviously another country?
At the beginning, these are men of few words we're dealing with in the woods. So it's hard to tell what their thoughts are. But I could kind of imagine that they were thinking, who is this guy? Who is this British guy who thinks he can come and live here? And this piece of land where we have this swamp in the middle of the forest is kind of the worst piece of land around here, as in it's the most remote and has the least access. So I think they thought we would probably last a year or two. Yeah. But then since then, every year I've made a big effort to go and help them out if they need any help with anything, just, anything at all, manually, stuff that's unskilled. And so we're kind of friends. They don't talk a lot, but we're friends.
Oh man, that's awesome. And then I want to ask you about the Norwegian forest cat.
Yes, we got him the year before my son was born. His name's Monty, after the British Army man. Okay. And he's just a badass. He's a big Norwegian forest cat. We only have giant pets. And I've seen him in a standoff against two foxes hold his ground. And he hunts all night, and he's just a good cat. He's just a very good cat. Keeps everything, all our cabins free of mice and rats. He's just a great cat.
And you have moose coming through there too, right?
We have, yeah, that's the main thing we have. We're a little bit too far south for bears,
Okay.
just here, but we have a lot of moose and we have wolves just here. Yeah.
Man, that is awesome. All right. I want to talk about the chamber. Once again, such an amazing reading experience. I can't really express how much I enjoyed this book. And I mean, psychological thriller, I guess if you have to put it in something, is that what you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what led you to this book as, I guess this is the ninth one?
That's the ninth one. And first of all, I just want to say that, as you know, I'm a big fan.
Oh,
so
man.
It means, especially with this photo on the back, how do you get one of those? So, so it means a lot that you say that. It really does. It means a lot. But the chamber came around because I'm fascinated by secret worlds, secret hidden worlds. So that includes the worlds of espionage, certain parts of the military. It includes certain like diplomatic worlds, and it also includes things like saturation diving. And as soon as I saw the world of saturation diving, this apex of the diving world, and how extreme their living conditions were, and how they have to stay calm under pressure, I was hooked. And I just went down a rabbit hole of research for about a year. And I was like, I need to set a thriller in this setting, because it's the most tense scenario even before anything goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like a lot can go wrong. How did you find out about it? How were you aware of, did you talk to somebody and it sparked the idea of, hey, I could set this sort of a suspenseful thriller in those conditions. And we can talk a little bit about what that entails, because it's right here on the back, so it doesn't give too much away, but especially the first thing that happens, but maybe the second thing happens too. But where did you get that idea that was like, oh, I'm going to write a book that takes place? It's essentially, for those people who are listening that are familiar with TV, and I just learned about this from working on The Terminal List for the first time, a bottle episode. So a bottle episode, when someone mentioned that, I said, well, what is that? And they told me that it's when an episode of TV takes place like in a room, in a bank vault, in something that locks down the cast, essentially for the most part in one location, which does a couple different things. It allows you to prep for the rest of the season somewhere else, and then it cuts back on production costs and that sort of thing, because it's confined to a room or a bar or whatever it might be. And so this is essentially a bottle episode, is what I was thinking as I was reading it, which is fascinating. So how did all this come about?
I think it first came about just because of my geeky interest in diving watches, and the fact that there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. Sibling watches. And is that new? Is that fairly new?
Fairly new. Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's great. That's the military one, right? The FXD.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully I'm gonna go visit those guys here. I think at the end of October, but say hello to the Tudor folks over there. And I want to get to the vintage watch repairing.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But yeah, before we do that.
So it came from just being a little bit of a nerd on watches, and hearing this phrase saturation diving, and thinking, what is that exactly? And then just doing a little research on YouTube, first of all, just not thinking this would be a book, just because I was intrigued, and just seeing what these guys live through. Let me set the picture for your audience. It's kind of, imagine you're on a ship, a diving vessel in the middle of the North Sea, and you go down below deck, and there is a gleaming stainless steel chamber the size of like a minibus, and the hatch is open, and you slither through, and the hatch gets locked behind you, and inside there are 5 other professional divers, and you just see bunks, and you see like a little table, and it's tiny, and you're pushing past each other. They're generally big dudes, and they're pushing past each other. And then this chamber gets pressurized, so you're now breathing helium or heliox instead of air, and everybody's voices go very high, and it gets very hot, very close, very humid, and you're going to be in there for 28 days living together. And if anything goes wrong, it's going to take at least 4 days to depressurize so that somebody can help you. And these people, they cannot get out. If something goes wrong, they have to help themselves. They have to be self-reliant. And then the next morning at 4 a.m., imagine you go through to a diving bell, and you get dropped down through the center of the ship down to the seabed, 350 feet below. And when you're down there, it's much smaller, this diving bell. It's the size of a small elevator in a bad hotel. And you look through the porthole and it's dark outside because you're so deep. And then your buddy puts your diving helmet on, called a hat, and it weighs like 20 kilos, so it crushes down on you. And then to equalize, normally you pinch your nose, but you can't do that with a helmet on. So you have to ram your face into the front of the helmet. That's how claustrophobic this is. And that's all before A, you get wet and you start work on the oil pipelines, and B, before the first murder.
Yeah, it is crazy just hearing about what these guys go through, because I know about saturation diving, but not in this detail. And certainly I never thought that people I guess I never took that next step to really research it, that they were down there or could be down there for so long. And like that part just makes me, I mean, I'm really glad that I didn't go to the STV team, so little mini sub teams and the SEAL teams, because if you're not a pilot, then you're just in the back of that thing for hours and hours and hours on end, just waiting to get to your location to go off and do whatever mission you need to do. But you're just back there in the dark. And like you're talking about equalizing those things, depending on the pilot, like if they're not staying at a steady depth, if they're like porpoising or doing whatever, like you're just clearing. So all you know is that you're not staying at a certain depth. It's all black. You're breathing that whatever kind of gas you're breathing down there. And it sounds awful. I mean, you're like in a torpedo, essentially, just holding on until you get where you're going. And sometimes they bump. If they're going into a harbor, you don't even know what you bumped into. You're kind of like trying to think like, what hour is this? How long has passed? But that sounds awful.
This is why you're more qualified to write this book than I am. I think you know more about this world, and I think those guys are wet, right? They're in their wetsuits.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Yeah, which is another level of craziness. And the fact that when I researched this, the just general people working in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caspian Sea and the Red Sea and the North Sea, working on oil infrastructure. It's a very intense job. They get very well paid. But then a lot of them are ex-Navy clearance divers as well. So some of the saturation divers that I read about, they were like, yeah, it's an intense job. It's a tough job. But when I was in the Falklands conflict, I was diffusing unexploded ordnance on a ship in a hot war. Like that's a whole other level of pressure.
Right.
So yeah, they have the right temperament for the job.
Yeah, I love how you wove all that stuff in here. The backgrounds of each of the characters, shows where you can come from to get to this place. That's another thing I found fascinating, is how did these people all end up in this place at this time together in this confined space? Like that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as well. But I love all the different backgrounds and how they started thinking about each other's backgrounds and all the rest of it. But when you first,
it's an interesting bunch of characters. They're kind of like outlaws.
Yeah,
they're offshore people, so they kind of like, there's a mixture of half ex-military and half welders and builders, construction people. Mm-hmm. But they all have that thing of just being able to get along in a small confined space. Like they trust each other. There's that level of trust, and that's what I wanted to play with. Like, can you actually trust each other? It's one of the people in the chamber doing something bad, or is it someone outside, some of the support people you have to rely on? And that's one thing that I find personally complicated, is relying on other people, being able to trust other people who are not your brothers, like that you train with, but the people outside. Sometimes the main character freaks out a little bit if she sees a new face outside because nobody's vouched for them. She hasn't worked with them before. And I find that dynamic interesting. Also, after maybe 2 or 3 days of not sleeping and not eating, can you trust yourself?
Oh yeah. I mean, it all plays into why you live where you live, not relying on other people. This just the way you describe it, it's almost like they're in a space station. There are a lot of similarities between being up there and then being underwater as well. And those tight, there you go, nice, I like it. Yeah,
big inspiration for this book. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I see it. Yeah, now I see
100%. It. I think if Emily, for anyone who doesn't know, we have the same editor, Emily Bessler, the amazing Emily Bessler, Queen of New York. And I think if I wrote science fiction for her, she would probably be slightly annoyed. So this is the closest I can get.
Okay.
This is kind of like it's a thriller, but it gets a little close at times. So it's all, like you said, it's almost that dynamic of being on a spacecraft.
Yeah.
And you're on your own. And if something goes wrong, you have to help yourselves. Nobody's coming. I quite like that.
Oh, that's yeah. Fun. A little bit of the Abyss, maybe. Now that you held up Alien, now I'm thinking about maybe a little bit of the Abyss. But it's its own thing. And When you're doing your research, how many females, obviously it plays in here, how many females kind of do that work? Not many.
Not many at all. There's a few. There's one famous female saturation diver who's a complete badass in the Gulf of Mexico called Marnie Slabinski, who's just very tough and very respected. And she was the first one who kind of broke the glass ceiling and worked harder than the people around her, and she's respected by everybody. But there's not many at all. Normally, it's just a group of 6 guys.
Yeah. And you worked in the watches down there. I saw that you mentioned a few times. And then also there's someone who does something that you do that works on vintage watches as part of the story to build their character up, even though they're not the main, one of the main people trapped in here. The vintage watch thing, where did that come about?
I like mechanical things. I like analog stuff. I'm not a digital person,
Yeah.
I like seeing how it works and taking it apart and either failing to put it back together again or succeeding. And with a watch, I like the idea that it's something that isn't a throwaway item. I can give it to my son, or I can give it to one of my best friend's sons when they get confirmed or when they graduate. I like the fact that it's a lasting, proper object, and it's alive. And when I restore an old watch, and I'm not a watchmaker, I'm just someone who can restore stuff at a base level. When I bring something back to life and it starts moving again, it's a very special feeling, especially if it was in a really bad shape. And I just enjoy that. I think it's a nice counterbalance to writing, because writing, as you know, there's no limits, there's no boundary to it. It's just like a blank screen, and then you create a story that's never existed before, and it could go in any direction. Whereas with watchmaking, I'll write over here, and then 2 hours later, I'll be over on my watchmaking bench fixing a watch, and you either get it right or you get it wrong. It's very binary. I like that.
Interesting. Do you take them all? So let's say you take apart an old Tudor, an old Rolex, something like that. Do you take it apart to each individual piece and polish them, clean them, and put them back and look at it and see, hey, well, look, I can see what is damaged here. Then put it back together.
I do, but I don't do it with Rolexes and Tudors, just because I'm not playing in that world when it comes to restoring stuff. I do it with inexpensive, like skin divers from the 70s that you've never heard of. Yeah. So they're not expensive. I'm not good enough to play around with my nice watches. It's more the basic stuff with no name on, which is my bread and butter. That's what I love. And I'll take them apart. If it breaks, it doesn't really matter, like monetarily, but it's quite fun to make it new again, and those plastic crystals on the old watches, I love them, and just to kind of rub some of those big scratches out and just bring it back so it's still scratched up, it's still lived a life, but it's alive again, and it's lubricated and it's working, and I can stick it on a NATO strap and actually swim with it.
Yeah. Oh man. So, but you do take them apart to each individual component then, one of those watches.
Yeah, but my limit is time only, so I don't deal with chronographs or anything more advanced, split seconds, anything like that. It's just a time only, and I love basic movements, and a lot of the movements on inexpensive mechanical watches from the 60s and 70s were really basic. So like you could get in there with a few tools, you'll be fine. Like it's not highly skilled.
That. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I like to outsource that stuff to the professionals. But same thing, analog, like just over the last few days. So I have a kind of this newer SUV, and I bought it because the whole thing around it was that you have the least amount of computers in this vehicle that you can possibly have on a new vehicle and still have it be legal. So it has airbags, sensors, whatever they have to do to make this thing legal. And so I was like, yeah, that's me. That's perfect. Still too many. So I think I'm going to go back. I just keep going back to my 80 series Land Cruiser because it's right at that cusp. I like my FJ6 too, which is from the 80s. So, but it's still a little bit, well, I love the 80s, but the 97 80 series has like just enough modern, but it's still mostly push buttons and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I've settled. I don't really get any more modern than 1997. But taking a watch apart, I can't even imagine. I would have that thing apart and be like, oh, what have I done? Oh my gosh, I just need to go buy this person another new watch.
I think with the trucks as well, it's that whole thing of I don't want any distractions. I don't want a big TV screen. I don't want another smart device that's watching me, listening to me. No, I want like a clock that doesn't work on the dash, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. I actually have a truck too, like a bigger truck. Same thing. I thought, big American truck, awesome. It'll have, no, too many computers. It still has a screen that's too big that I have to hit. I don't want to touch a screen. I want to hit like a button for something and like turn a knob. Like that's as far as I want to get. And one day I hope to get to a place, not there yet, where I have an old phone and that's my phone is the one that's like plugged in, maybe with an answer machine, probably not, but it just rings old school. And you have to like catch me on that, but no, none of this stuff, none of the computer. Well, I guess I have to computer to write, but as analog as I can possibly get, is where I'd like to get to at some point. Not there yet.
I agree. I agree, man. I think that the last generation of writers were the guys who would write where you are, write where I am, and then they would send off the printed manuscript in a bag to the editor in New York. That was the peak.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought going into this. I thought that all the way up until probably 2 months or so before before the first book published. So I still had that fantasy of like, as I grew up reading all these guys that a lot of them still writing today, David Morrell, Nelson DeMille, there number, AJ Quinnell, JC Pollock, Mark Olden, Tom Clancy, all these guys. And part of the allure of wanting to be an author so young was that I could be up in a cabin in the woods and I could write and I could send that thing off. And, in my little, 11-year-old brain, 12-year-old, 13-year-old brain, I thought, okay, you send that thing off. Maybe you go on a Sunday morning talk show, whatever, do an interview, and that's about it. Then they make it into a movie and you write your next book, but you're away from people. And that was part of the whole allure of being an author and wanting to be an author from such an early age. And then I think I held on to that. I really do think I held on to it until a couple months before the first book came out. And I knew I needed a website and that sort of a thing. But, and I didn't have a social media account yet, but I was like dabbling. I'd created something just so I could see what was going on in that world because I never had one before that. And then about 2 months out, probably, certainly a month out, I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's not the 80s anymore. It's not 1985. It's not 1995. It's not even 2005, where you could maybe still get away with it a bit. Now, if you want to have that level, unless you're an outlier, I think, unless you're like a total outlier, you want that level of, I don't like to use the word success, but freedom. You're gonna have to do some other things other than just write if you're, scrapping. And so I realized, okay, well, here we go. Just looked at I looked at the battle space. I'd been avoiding it, and then I looked at it just like I would in Iraq and Afghanistan, and was like, okay, how do you capitalize on momentum? How do you look for gaps in the enemy's defenses? How do I adapt faster than the enemy? And in this case, that means adapting to an ever-changing environment, a more rapidly changing environment than we had between 75 and 85, 85 and 95. Maybe a little farther to the right than that, but not much. Now it's evolving and changing. And how do you build a readership at that time, 2018? Okay, now I'm going all in to do that because I've looked at it like the battle space now. But like you, I would love to. The allure is being.
It's fascinating that you describe it like that way, like at almost like a tactical, operational, and strategic level. Like you plan this whole thing out. I like that very much. And I think the last guy who got away with it was Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah. Oh, certainly.
Writing like No Country for Old Men in the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico, not doing any publicity, not doing anything at all. Mm-hmm. He did one like interview with Oprah where he wouldn't really answer any questions. That was it. And respect to that guy.
Oh yeah, you could get away with it before when your publicist and publisher was doing all of those things that they did back then. Now they still do that, but this is more for the audience than for you, obviously. That it's kind of like the Avengers movies. Like a lot of times, the Avengers movies pays for all those other movies that don't make any money, type of thing. So same thing. Stephen King, who you mentioned, John Grisham, like those books and those authors pay for a lot of other authors, essentially.
That's very true.
Allocate the resources. If you're allocating resources, well, you're going to put them in those so they can continue to pay for everyone else, essentially. So I recognize that and realize that if you're going to do it today, you really need to take ownership of a lot of those things and do some of those things that were traditionally done by publishing houses. And then you have to do them, which is also, it's that double-edged kind of sword deal where, yes, now you can do it and take ownership of it where you really couldn't back in 1985 or 1995. So, it's kind of the give and take thing. So, but
that's true. And I do love the fact that readers get a bit of extra access to us. Like I was just imagining what Cormac McCarthy's life was like. I had no idea. Whereas we can just give little glimpses, and we can interact with readers, and we can be a bit more hands-on and proactive when it comes to events and stuff, which is really fun. It's for me as a fan talking to writers, it's nice to have that two-way thing. So I think readers appreciate that.
You know what I wish I'd done back growing up? I wish that I'd written a letter to all those authors that I just described, like figured out, back when I was 11, they were too inaccessible. Like I just didn't think that was a possibility that someone would write back to a kid, essentially, no matter how serious my intent was, or genuine my intent was. But I could have, and I hear some stories of people that wrote a letter to Lee Child, even in 1998 or something like that, 1999, and they got back to them, type of a thing. They wrote back. So you hear those types of stories. So I wish that I had looked up the address of who published this book. Oh, Simon and Schuster. Okay, I'll look up the address for Simon and Schuster somehow. Maybe it's right here in the book. Maybe it's not. Maybe okay, Avenue of the Americas. Okay, hey, I'll just address it to this author, care of Simon and Schuster, and see what happens. And maybe I would have gotten a letter back from one of those guys. And how cool would it be today to have a letter from one of those guys that I read during that time frame? That would have been amazing. But I think about it now, and people reach out to me all the time on social channels, and I try to get back to everybody I possibly can. But I wish I had tried that when I was a kid.
Yeah. Now that you see it from the other side, it's nice to receive letters. I like getting DMs and emails, but I do like the occasional letter from a reader. Yeah. I've had one that got to me here, and they addressed it to Will Dean, author, The Forest, Western Sweden. And they got to me.
No way.
Yeah, from the UK.
That's amazing. I was just listening to Rogan. He's talking to Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe took a picture with, who was it? Daniel Day-Lewis? Anyway, something like that. And the person who took the picture, I guess they developed it and sent it to Russell Crowe, Australia. And he said it made it to him. Yeah.
I can believe that.
Yeah. Man, that is wild. But I would like to go back once again to that analog where you have the phone plugged into the wall, old school, and correspondence via mail, via actual mail. Because then you're actually investing in that process. Kind of like when people can make any comment that they want on any sort of post on social channels without having to invest anything in that. And like that there's something about investing in something that gives you, that makes you take time that you're never going to get. It has to be that important to you to invest time rather than offhanded, horrible comment, a trolling thing, whatever that is. It's so easy. It's so easy. Whereas before, if you're going to do that in 1985, 1990, you would have to, once again, find this address for, let's say, Simon and Schuster, address this letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, go to the mailbox, mail it. It would have to get there, go to the mailroom, work its way up, maybe to an assistant somewhere who would open it, read it, possibly give it to your editor, maybe, who would maybe read one line and say this person's crazy and throw it out. You never even see it. But now you see all with not any essentially investment, a couple seconds of investment. So it's an interesting time.
And there was that whole thing of signing a document was a serious thing that an adult did with ink, and it was your signature. And now when I sign a contract every, let's say, month for a TV deal or a movie deal or for a book contract, and I sign it on my phone with my finger. I hate it. Yeah. I want a piece of paper. I want to have a cold beer, and I want to have my dog there, and I want to have a little moment where I sign this thing with ink. And that's one thing I would quite like to go back to, is proper contracts.
Interesting. I haven't thought about that, because for me, I'm going 1,000 miles an hour, and I understand very little of what's in these contracts because of how they're written and how long they are. And so now, unless I have to sign it, I just have someone else do it for me, because I'm just like, I don't want to, I don't understand what this is, what all this lawyer talk is in these documents. This could mean a lot of different things when I read this sentence, and I don't know which one it is. And it's probably written that way for a reason. It's kind of like my iPhone thing that asks me to, give consent for whatever pops up. You're like, yeah, fine. Okay. Yeah. And meanwhile, I've just given someone access to every email, every photo. I mean, who knows? It's crazy. But I do like, now that you say it, going back to mail the document, read it. I know two people who, and I shouldn't say I know them. I've heard of two people. One I talked to, forget exactly who it was though. And they, oh, no, I know. Won't say their name though, but they make their contracts be one page. They've all this stuff make it 1 page so I can understand it. And they demand that these long contracts for movies, TV shows, in their case, 1 page. I'm like,
That's
no.
exactly how it should be.
I'm like,
I
you can
love
do
that.
it. They're like, yep.
Yeah.
I guess when you get to a certain stage, you can, have some demands like that, I guess.
That makes perfect sense to me. It should be 1 page. It should be like the number and a couple of other details, and then you choose your pen, you choose your ink, and you sign it, and that's done. Yeah.
Yeah, that I could do. I could do the 1 page. I'm not sure. I'm definitely not at the stage where I can say, "Hey, I want all my contracts to be 1 page," but maybe one day. Who knows? Back to chamber right here. So we're not giving anything away by what happens early on, because it happens pretty quick in here. And I was surprised at how quick it happened, which was awesome. That was another part of it, because I tend to like build up in mind to things, and you're like right into it. It's so awesome. And then if you start this, you will not stop until it's done. I know that for a fact. You will and if you have to go to bed, you will wake up and be thinking about this and get right back to it, but someone dies right out of the gate. And how deep are they when that happens?
So they're on the ship, but in the chamber, but they're at a depth, a pressure of 100 meters deep, so 350 feet. And so they know that if they do emergency decompression, that's going to be 4 whole days where they're going to be kind of dealing with the corpse. And then they find out they have to do some kind of almost like a remote autopsy procedure to take fluids.
Yeah.
Which is, when you're in a close environment like that, and it's your buddy who's died, and you have to don masks and gloves and be talked through by professionals on the outside, and there's a police detective on the other side of the glass. It's the most intense situation I think I could think of.
Yeah. And
because we all think, how would I deal with a home intruder? That goes through all of our minds. What are my exit routes? What are my plans? How am I going to defend my family? But when you're stuck in a tiny chamber, you've got no exit plans. You've got no answers. And that's the horrific thing for me, is not being in control of your own destiny like that.
Yeah, you feel it. Like, you feel it reading this. You're like, yeah, you feel claustrophobic when you're reading this. You feel that suspense. I mean, it's amazing. Did you talk to someone who had to do that procedure or something like that, where someone did die? Has someone died like that, where they had to do an autopsy, or is that all made up?
It's not made up. It's kind of taken from different safety documents and different like investigative reports after the event.
Okay.
Like there's one scene, it's not even a scene that happens live in the book, but they talk about how to do CPR inside the diving bell.
Yeah.
Where they have to put like a brace around your neck, hang you from a hook in the diving bell, half flood it with water, and then headbutt you back to life. And that's genuine. And if they can't headbutt you, they have to use their knee into your chest as a chest compression. And I was just astonished reading this stuff at what these people have to kind of sign up for.
Yeah, insane. And so what's happening is, you give us a little bit more. You can take us maybe to the second event that happens.
So after the first death, they don't know what it is. It could be that this young diver had some kind of pre-existing health condition that wasn't screened out by the medics outside. So they put him up into the lifeboat, which is also at the same pressure. So they have to kind of drag someone up a metal tube, a metal piece of ducting into the lifeboat, which is very hard with a dead weight, and then seal him in there to have a much faster decompression. So there's only 5. They're sitting there with an empty seat at the table when they have their meal, and they have their food, and they have to have a lot of hot sauce on it because you can't taste food when you breathe heliox. And they're constantly looking at this empty seat. And then the next morning, someone else dies. And it's at that point they know this is not an accident, and this is not some kind of health problem with one dude. This is potentially murder. And is the murder inside or outside? And then instead of like a Hitchcock style ticking clock or ticking bomb, you've got the pressure gauge counting down on the wall. So they know they can't get out. And they know the police can't help them. And nobody else can help them. And you can't sleep if you don't trust your buddies who are next to you. So it's, I wanted to bring out the maximum tension, because I think, and this would be interesting to hear what you think about this, but I think we have to kind of compete with the video games makers and the movie producers to create almost like a full dive VR experience with a book. It has to be immersive, and it has to be so you feel like you're there with those characters. You're smelling those smells, you're breathing that gas, and you can't get out until the end of the book. You can't get out of that chamber until the end of the book. So I wanted to build the tension until the point where it's almost too much.
Yeah, no, you feel it. You feel like you're in there with these people, and you're seeing it through one really POV. And yeah, just incredible. You're right. You're competing now with every streaming service where it's on demand, essentially any show, any movie ever made. Whereas like growing up in the 80s, you had to wait for 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock for your show to come on, or you had to wait for Friday, Saturday night for your parents to take you to the movies, or drop you off at the movies that were starting at 7:15 or 8:30 or whatever your movie was starting. And you can only play Atari 2600 for half hour because it's Atari 2600. It's not these fully immersive gaming experience with VR where you're playing for weeks on end, and so you're competing with all of those plus all the social channels on something that you carry around with you 24/7 that's made to keep you locked in to that and not doing things like reading with a book for hours away from this device. So it's crazy all the things you're competing with as an author today, but you do it brilliantly in this. It really is a genius work. I don't just say that to say that. I really did love it, and think you just did an amazing job. Do you dive also?
No, I do a lot of offshore, like I do a lot of open water swimming around here. So I'll swim kind of up to, probably not as far as you used to swim, but I swim kind of up to like 6 kilometers from
Nice.
rock to rock, from island to island. And I really enjoy that. And my wife, Swedes are a different kind of people. So my wife starts swimming in January, February. Even when she was 6 months pregnant with our son, she swam in the ocean through the ice.
Wow.
When it was, yeah, the water was, I mean, it was almost freezing and the air temperature was probably -10 or something, and she was swimming. So I have to kind of keep up with her.
Yeah. Did writing this book make you want to try scuba diving? Obviously very different than what you're talking about here, but do something like scuba dive recreationally?
The opposite.
Yeah.
Writing this book made me think, you know what, I like to push myself. I like to do some interesting stuff out in the wilderness, but not this.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of not being able to walk away, not having any options.
Yeah. No, it's wild that these people do this all around the world. And it's such a tight, fraternity, now sorority with a couple, females in there. And what an amazing, crazy group of people to want to do that and spend all this time underwater. And then you touch on it here, obviously quite a bit about what their their lives are like outside of that. And how different that is on the outside, but there's still this connection. Of course, everything is your reputation in here is your currency. It reminded me a lot of the SEAL teams. Your reputation, who vouches for you if you don't know someone personally to get these jobs. But what an incredible group of people.
When I fly over the North Sea, which I do about once a month to get to France or get to UK to do an event, I look out of the window now when I'm having a drink and I'm reading a novel, and I look down at the water, that vast canvas of ocean, and I imagine there's probably a dozen or so people hard at work at the bottom of the sea right there. And I kind of tip my hat and say thank you to them just for being down there, keeping the world going, keeping the oil flowing through these pipelines. It's a hell of a job.
Yeah, no kidding. And yeah, you've flown all around the world doing events. Hong Kong, we talked about. You were in Hong Kong for an event not too long ago. But with all these books, this one in particular, are there any TV adaptation talks going on for this?
There's stuff going on right now, so I can't really talk about this one right now, but I've got 3 other books that are in development right now. So I'm busy with those. They're at different stages. Mm-hmm. As you know, it's like a miracle that stuff gets made. So it's often like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but I'm learning a lot, and it's interesting to be involved as like an executive producer, and I'm starting to figure it out. It's a different world, but I'm figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I do it too. I'm a student, always a student, no matter what I'm doing. But yeah, exactly my same takeaway. It's a miracle that anything gets made, and 2, that anything good gets made, because now you have so many people. Like if this book's awful, there's no one to blame but you. If my book's awful, there's no one to blame but me. When you're part of this team that has so many different people on it, and then you're taking notes on the scripts from people at all levels up this, let's say, chain of command through different production companies, all the way to the top of a big one, and then back down, that you're either incorporating or not. And if not, then explaining why, making your arguments. But I mean, it's a team effort to get something over that finish line. And it's very interesting how different the two mediums are. And the hope is obviously that bringing all these people together, you get the best product, and that's why the team is so important. Like who's working on these things with you is so important. And I can only imagine how many projects that we'll never know about went off the rails that could have been amazing that we haven't even heard about, whether it's book adaptations or just a screenplay out there that could have been amazing that had certain people attached to it that just for whatever reason didn't work and off the rails it went. I think that probably happens more often than not.
100%. This one was my book last year, the last one, and this has been bought directly by a network for the
Nice.
first time.
Okay.
So then I think it's got a good chance it's going to happen. It's like 50-50, I would say, in terms of odds. It's a really good team. And that one features the the Breitling emergency. Like
Nice. Hey, exactly. Nice. I like it. We have so many parallels. It's awesome. Yeah, I think the more they invest in these things, then that kind of inches things forward. So maybe they option it. Okay, that's one thing. And then they get the Harris showrunner or something. Okay, that's another little bit. And then they have attach a director and actress, a little more. And then they get a pilot screenplay, whatever. Okay, script. That's a little more. But so I think all those things, just that the odds increase incrementally the further you get. And then, but for me, until it was on screens, I was still like, something can happen, and it might never see the light of day. Even when it was done, I still in my head was like, manage expectations, realize there's still things that can happen that'll keep this thing from being on screen. So I didn't really believe it until I saw it for real on screen. Not just me getting a cut of it and doing my edits on the cuts, but seeing it on a screen where everybody can now go get it on Amazon Prime or whatever. So I keep thinking that way about all the other ones as well. So manage those expectations.
Well, yours has an amazing team, and thank goodness the person who bought it, because it's just kind of a dream setup. So I'm as a fan, I'm very happy the way things turned out.
Oh man, thank you. And then as we wrap up here, so I know you've got to get back to chopping wood, writing books, doing your next whatever you're going to do the rest of the day here. Something you wrote in acknowledgments really stood out to me as well. And at the end here, you write, to every shy, socially awkward kid, I see you. I was you. It will get easier. I promise. You'll make it through to the other side. That one really hit home for me. And I think it will for a lot of people. So I'm really glad you included that.
Yeah, I think when I was a little kid, I felt a bit like an alien. I felt like I was in my own bubble watching other kids who seemed to know all the answers. And I was kind of watching them for clues. And really, I was only comfortable building dens and being in nature with my dog. I had a big Rottweiler called Maximus when I was a kid. He was great. And I felt very comfortable in his company, but I didn't really understand the humans around me that well. Yeah. And it took me a long time to figure all that out. And I did by the time I was a teenager. But yeah, I think stories and books help us through that difficult age. And even now, like my male friends, we don't talk to each other like eye to eye. We talk to each other by lighting a bonfire in the woods and then not looking at each other, just looking into the fire. And then eventually we'll have a talk, we'll have a chat. And I think it's that thing of you need whatever medium of storytelling clicks for you. And for me as a little kid, it was definitely books.
Yeah, I love that. And what is next? Are you on the one book a year type train now?
I am indeed, yeah. So the next book will be out next summer, and it's kind of Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane meets maybe Winter's Bone. It's very claustrophobic again, set in a little family of writers, the father of which is obsessed with Ernest Hemingway. Wow. And they're living in a very, I can't explain exactly how they're living right now, but they're living in very confined quarters in a kind of similar town to where I grew up. And the kid is trying to escape, and the wife is just trying to get by living with this dude who's very intense in a very Hemingway-esque way. And yeah, it's psychological again, and it's all about escaping whatever confines have been put on you and realizing you can do it.
Wow, man. Well, I will be looking forward to that. I will get it the day that it is out, and everybody else Chamber right here. Check out Will Dean's other stuff as well. But the Chamber is out now. It's the latest book. And for a discount, go to officialjackcar.com. You can check it out there and support independent bookstores in the process. And then tell a friend about it as well, because, man, you just crushed it with this book. Amazing.
Thank you very much, man. And I appreciate you having me on. I really do. This book club, like, you're a busy man. And for you to do this, you're kind of an asset to the book community. And I think we're lucky to have you. So thank you.
Man, I appreciate that. Just want to try to give back and encourage reading, because really for me, it's been the foundation of everything, not just being an author today, but all the things that I did in the SEAL teams as well. That history, studying warfare, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies, terrorism, all that stuff all has a basis in books and reading. So I just want to encourage that as much as I possibly can, kind of counter the current trends that we talked about with everything that's streaming and everything on social media and gaming and all the rest of it. So, but man, thank you so much. Appreciate you being out there, and what an amazing example you are with your family. Please, everybody, also check Will out on social media. All that stuff is attached in show notes. And man, can't wait for your next one.
I can't wait for your next one. And if you're ever in Sweden, you wanna hang out in the woods, you're always very welcome.
Oh man, thank you. I'd love to come and say hi one of these days. That'd be amazing. That'd be really cool. I might not leave, or I'll get a place like 20 miles down the road or something. But man, you take care, and thanks again.
Thank you, Jack.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, click here to watch another episode, or click here to watch a clip from the podcast.